Hello, welcome to this episode of The Tracking Archer. There's a lot of hubbub in the archery world about sharpening a Simmons broadhead. So many times I see people, I can't get my Simmons sharp, I can't figure out these sharks, they're just problematic, I grind and I grind, I can't figure it out. Hold up. Settle down, it's okay. It's gonna be all right. I think these broadheads, it seems more than any other head on the market, get into people's minds. It's the curve of the blade. The curve of the blade, I think, just messes with people's brains, and they start to, I can sharpen any broadhead, but these Simmons, they're just struggle. And I don't doubt that people struggle with them. I'm not making fun, but I really think it's just a mental thing. There are principles of sharpening that remain the same regardless of the blade. I don't care if you're talking a single bevel chisel or a single bevel broadhead or a plain blade or a two-blade broadhead or a pocket knife or a lawnmower blade, or whatever the blade, you name it, there are principles that remain the same. And so I'm hopeful that this video will help you guys a little bit and not be so much about a method of sharpening, but the underlying foundations of sharpening, so that you can have the knowledge and understand how to go about it, no matter your method. I like to simplify sharpening into 3 C's, okay? Consistent angle, create a burr, clean the edge. I'm going to go over each one of these with you as we talk about sharpening this Simmons Safari broadhead, and I'll explain the principles of sharpening as I do so. The first principle I mentioned, the first C, consistent angle. Folks, you have to maintain a consistent angle when you're sharpening. If not, then you're sharpening down here on the bevel, and then you're sharpening in the middle of the bevel, and then you're sharpening at the tip. If you're not maintaining a consistent angle when you're abrading that steel with your file or your stone or your ceramic, then you're not going to get a nice clean apex. So you have to maintain a consistent angle. Some may be able to do that with a file. I personally, maybe it's just my perfectionism, I prefer a guided system. Something that is going to hold the edge at a consistent angle to the stone being used. And so I will stick this Safari broadhead into this Work Sharp Precision Adjust Original. Now, I want to make a note on this. This sharpener is my favorite way to sharpen broadheads, 2-blade broadheads. I'm primarily a 2-blade shooter. The reason is because this sharpener has stones that are narrow enough to maintain contact with the curve of the Safari blades. These shark broadheads will still work on this flat stone because this stone is so narrow. All right, literally the only difference between this broadhead and, say, a cutthroat or a VPA or whatever is just the curve of the blade. And so all you need to do is find a stone that maintains contact in that curve. That's it. The principles of sharpening remain the same regardless. So you're not going to want to put this on a big flat diamond stone. It's not going to work. The round files, ceramic rods, a jewel stick, something like that with a curved surface is going to work well. But I like this Work Sharp because it works on single bevel heads, it works on double bevel heads, and because this stone is so narrow, it works on the Simmons sharks beautifully. So my recommended broadhead sharpener is this Work Sharp Precision Adjust Original. The Pro version has wider stones. I don't own it, but I highly doubt that it would work with these curved blades. So if you're going to purchase this, buy the original with the narrow stones. And when I install this blade into the clamp here, I like to align one corner of the clamp right at the corner of the ferrule. Now, this may vary for you depending on which model Simmons shark you have. But I like to clamp one corner of the clamp right at the corner of the ferrule, and then the other corner I pretty much line up with where the black of the broadhead meets the beginning of the bevel grind. So it gives me a pretty consistent distance from the main body of the sharpener, so that I'm not grinding at a bunch of different angles as I move further away and closer with the stone. So it's pretty straight, even with the curve. It's not bad. Works well for me. So the first principle, consistent angle. It's taken care of by this jig, okay? I personally find I like to sharpen these at 20 degrees. Now that is not the factory bevel. The factory bevel is steeper than that. I don't know, it's 25, 27, something like that. I like to grind these to where the bevel is sharper. So in order to do that, I've got to remove a lot of steel off the upper edge of the bevel before I get down to the apex. So on your coarse stone, on my coarse stone, I'm gonna grind for quite a while. And that, I think, is something that people don't quite understand. Is they say, well, yeah, I've got it in a jig, I've got it at a consistent angle. Yes, but you've got to maintain that angle until you grind all the way down to where the apex of that blade is. All right, you're taking a lot more steel off that upper edge than the lower edge if you're going to use a different angle than what comes from the factory. I could match the factory bevel and my sharpening would go much quicker, but I really prefer that more acute point on the edge that the 20-degree bevel gives me. So what I'm going to do is I've got my sharpener set to 20 degrees. I've adjusted it right there. And I'm going to start with my coarse stone. And I'm going to put my hand right under this because there is a little bit of give in this system. So what I like to do is I like to stick my hand under here and I torque my wrist up underneath of it to support it while I grind. Let me show you how well this works. If you can see that, I have colored that edge with a Sharpie to help visualize where I'm grinding. You can see that on the upper edge, I have started removing steel, but I have not removed edge down here at the apex. So I'm changing the bevel, and so there's a lot of steel going to be removed up top, and at first it's going to go quickly because you're not removing a whole lot. You're just doing this tiny little high point up here, but as you get further and further down, it's going to take longer and longer to grind that steel away over this broader surface that you're creating. So don't get weary and give up. Keep grinding on that consistent angle until you create a burr. Create a burr, the second principle of sharpening. I'll be here a little bit. I'll get back with you. I've been grinding for, I don't know, 5-7 minutes. And I think this is where a lot of people mess up, okay? Pay attention here. It appears as though I have ground that entire edge, maybe with the exception of a tiny bit right here and right there. But the truth is, I have not ground this completely to the apex yet because I cannot detect a burr on the other side of this blade. I should be able to take my fingernail and have it catch right on this little tiny piece of metal. You can hear it right here. I've got a burr right here, but nowhere along the rest of this blade is there a burr yet. So keep grinding. So, first principle, I have maintained a consistent angle. Second principle, I have created a burr. I should be able to take my fingernail and pull it up that edge on the underside. And have it catch that little piece of metal that's folded over to the underside all the way along that blade, which it does. So I have kept the consistent angle, I've created a burr. Time to flip this blade over, oops, the other way, and create a burr on this side. So you're gonna grind this bevel until you have knocked the burr from this side back to the original side. Then you're gonna flip it again, move to your next stone, your finer stone, create a burr, flip it over, remove that burr, or create another one on the other side, flip it back over, move to your next stone, create a tiny burr. And as you get to the finer grits, you're not necessarily gonna feel as much of a burr, but you just work it pretty good, and you should be able to feel the tiniest little bit. Truth be told, this first initial grinding is the hardest part. Once you get your bevel set the way that you want it at the proper angle, the rest of the stones are a breeze. It takes a fraction of the time. So consistent angle, create a burr, flip it over, remove the burr, flip it over, move to your next stone, create a burr, flip it over, remove the burr, move to your next stone, flip it over, create a burr. You get the idea. Just repeat the process. Create a burr, flip it, remove the burr. Simple, 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 simple. Doesn't matter if we're talking a file, doesn't matter if we're talking a single bevel broadhead. The only difference with the single bevels is instead of maintaining an angle on this flat side, you're just gonna lay it flat on a stone, like so. Instead of maintaining the angle, you're gonna lay it flat to remove that burr. Same principle, same exact principles. Chisel, okay? Maintain your angle, consistent angle. Create a burr on this back side, flip it over, lay it flat on the stone, remove the burr. Not hard, guys. Same thing with the Simmons. Consistent angle, create a burr, remove the burr. So I started grinding on this side, created a burr on the other side, then I flipped the broadhead over and I ground on this bevel until I can feel a burr on the other side again. All the way along there. Now I'm gonna move to my next grit and do the same thing. 600 grit. This is all the longer it takes. And I've already removed that burr or moved it to the other side. So I'm going to flip over and do the same thing with the 600 grit on the next side. With these finer grits, all you're doing is removing the scratch marks from the grit previous. And we're done with our 600 grit. Onto the ceramic. On the ceramic, I like to go with light pressure, and I like to do just a push stroke. Probably doesn't make all that much difference, but it seems to work well for me, so that's what I do. Just work my way down the edge a few times. Then I flip this over. Put my little support block in here. And do the same thing. Just again, very light pressure. So I do that. I do like to go back and forth a little bit. By going back and forth a few strokes at a time, I'm bending that burr back and forth and back and forth and back and forth so that it breaks off. And that's exactly what you want before we move on to the next step. All right, so if I did what I'm supposed to, oh yeah, that bites fingernail really nicely. And even at this point, it's shaving hair. So we have accomplished two of the principles of sharpening. We've maintained a consistent angle. We've created our burrs back and forth. Remember, grind until you feel that burr, flip it over, grind until you feel that burr, flip it over, move to the next grit. Pretty simple. Okay, once you've worked through all your grits, we're gonna do something that I would consider optional. This off the ceramic is most definitely sharp enough to hunt with, but the last principle I like to use in sharpening, or claim in sharpening, is to match with the C's, clean the edge. Because when you strop, really you're not grinding any metal away, you're just polishing things. You're just polishing that apex so that it is just a really fine, acute point. So I like a leather strop with green compound on it. There's different compounds that are different grits and blah, 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 but I find a leather strop with compound works pretty well. So what I'm gonna do is just lightly, do your best to match the angle. It's not so vital on this step to match the angle, but you ought to be pretty close. So I'm just gonna pull stroke, pull stroke, pull stroke, flip it over, do the same thing. So we have maintained consistent angle, we have created our burrs, and now we are cleaning the edge, just polishing it. Three principles of sharpening that apply to anything out there. Grind your bevel consistently, create your burr, remove the burr over and over again, and then clean the edge on a strop. And with that, boys and girls, we have a broadhead that you could shave with. Simmons Safari. Not that difficult to sharpen. Just be sure to follow the principles of sharpening. Find a stone, whether this work sharp or a file or whatever abrasive maintains contact in that curve, and sharpen it as you would any other object. Okay? Consistent angle, create a burr, clean the edge. Hope it's a help. Thanks for watching. This has been the Tracking Archer. Until next time, God bless and happy hunting to you.